Wolfwalkers.
The ones that can talk to wolves with some wild magic. Today started out as the best day of my life.
Back here tonight, first show's at 7.
Yes! Woohoo! Tiny Diamond is my name. Come straight from my daddy's name. My body's made of glitter, and I'll throw it in your face.
No way! It's a wizard staff. Dad was a wizard.
What? Your dad was an accountant.
My name's Eep.
Big stuff.
It's news. And we're the world's first family, the Croods.
Another glorious morning.
Through the glass, over the hedge, follow the rainbow to where my dreams begin.
Shusher, shusher!
I will be free.
Ready.
Hey, Chung, I'm gonna be there soon. In my rocket to the moon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ramin Zahed. I'm the editor-in-chief of Animation Magazine in Los Angeles, and I'm very happy and proud and honored to be moderating this year's end of the year award season animated feature panel. With me today, we have 8 amazing animation veterans who were kind enough to join us today for this panel, and they gave us some amazing movies during this very crazy and challenging year and kept us entertained, and very happy to have them here. So without further ado, let me introduce them around the Zoom family here. We've got, on the left, we have Mr. Tomm Moore, the writer-director of Cartoon Saloon's wonderful Wolfwalkers, which just opened on Apple TV, and Oscar-nominated for his previous works, and very happy to have him here. Hello, Tomm.
Hey.
Next to Tomm, we got Walter Dohrn, and very happy to have him. He is the writer-director of DreamWorks movie Trolls World Tour, which was released earlier this year. It was one of the last movies that made it to the theaters, and also had a digital release, and very happy to have him here. Welcome, Walt.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Here, to my left, we got Mr. Joel Crawford, the director of this month's DreamWorks release, The Croods, A New Age, and the movie just opened recently theatrically in several territories and did very well and was very well received. Welcome to the gang, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you. And right next to Joel, we have Mr. Dan Scanlon, writer-director of Pixar's first movie of the year, Onward, which was released in the first quarter and did very well. And again, it was one of the last movies I saw in the theater. Very happy to have you here, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And right next to Dan, we have Mr. Kemp Powers, the writer and co-director of Pixar's second movie of the year, Soul, which is debuting on Disney Plus later this month, December. And very happy to have him join us. Kemp, thank you.
Thanks. And I'm a rookie, by the way.
The new voice of the year. There you go. And next to Kemp, we have Kris Pearn, the director of the Braun and Netflix release earlier on, the wonderful Willoughbys, a book adaptation that was also got rave reviews and charming, and very happy to have you here with us, Kris.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. And of course, right next to Kris, we have the lovely Gitanjali Rao, the writer, director, exec producer, editor of the wonderful indie movie that's coming up on Netflix in January, The Bombay Rose. We're so happy to have you with us, Gitanjali.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, we have the amazing Mr. Glen Keane on the bottom square here. The amazing Disney veteran, Oscar winner for the lovely short Dear Basketball, and the director of this year's wonderful October release, I believe, Over the Moon, which was also beautifully received, a charming movie. Thank you so much for joining us, Glen.
Thanks, Rami. Looking forward to our chat.
All right. So without further ado, I guess the first question I have, it comes up like an introduction. If you could just give us a brief pitch about your movie and what was it about it that really excited you and made you want to go to work every day? I guess we can start with Tomm on the left.
Okay. Well, our movie is set in 1650 in my hometown here in Kilkenny, but it kind of tells a universal story. It's a little girl from England comes over with her dad to hunt the wolves, and she makes friends with a little Irish girl, and she starts to realize that her new friend might be one of the wolves that her dad is hunting. So that's just the germ of the conflict, and that relationship is the heart of the movie, and that's what made me keep wanting to work on it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tomm. All right, Walt.
Yeah, Trolls World Tour, it's about harmony in diversity, the celebration of differences, which ended up being pretty apropos for our times, of all times. What really got me excited was the idea was telling this story through genres of music and kind of the celebration of music. And that's what got me going every day.
That's awesome. Thank you. Joel, you're next. Tell us about the Croods.
Working at DreamWorks, I'd seen many movies and worked on many movies. And you have the rare experience sometimes to see a movie from the studio that you actually didn't work on as a board artist and see it with fresh eyes. 7 years ago, I saw the first Croods and loved it. Loved that it was about family, trying to survive and the family dynamics changing. And so when I had the opportunity to jump in and pick up where the first movie left off, I love stories about family that are so universally relatable to everybody. And so that's been a big driver for me.
Awesome. Great job. Dan, tell us about Onward.
Well, Onward, is based on a personal story of mine, having lost my father when I was a year old. And my brother was 3 at the time, and neither of us remembered him at all. And it's based on the question of, who was he and how were we like him? So it's the story of 2 teenage elf brothers in a modern fantasy world that's lost its magic. And they have an opportunity, thanks to a little magic left in the world, to spend one day with the father that they lost, that they never knew. And it's their journey to meet him and go on this crazy quest through this modern fantasy world.
Thank you. Kemp, tell us about Soul and how you got involved.
Well, yeah, I guess Soul is the simplest version, is about the meaning of life. Still into an animated feature. But it's about a character, Joe Gardner. He's a guy who his entire life he's dreamed of being a jazz musician. And but he's had a day job the entire time. And on the day he finally gets his big break, he dies. And he feels that the universe has cheated him out of what's supposed to be his true purpose. So he refuses to go into death. And through a turn of events, this soul who does not want to die, who refuses to die, finds himself saddled with a soul 22 who doesn't want to live, but is also the key to him getting back to his body, hopefully in time to play the gig of his dreams. And the story was born, there's no better way to put it, out of Pete Docter's midlife crisis. After the success I think he had with Inside Out, and started wondering what's next. And that was a germination of this idea. And at the point that he landed on a main character who was a jazz musician, and jazz really is the perfect metaphor for what the themes of the film, which is we have no control over what's going to be thrown at us in our lives. The only thing we have control over is what we can do with it, and it's our responsibility to turn it into something beautiful. So when he decided to make it a black jazz musician, he invited me on first as his writer and then as his partner as co-director to try to bring Joe's story to life.
Kris, tell us about your Willoughbys journey.
Well, it's basically it's a story of 4 old-fashioned kids raised on books that decide that their lives would be better if they were orphans. The only problem is they have parents, so they kind of and they trick their parents into leaving, going on a kind of forever road trip, and they collide with the modern world where they realize that being an orphan isn't like in the old-fashioned stories, and so they end up going on their own road trip to try to save their family. And along the way, they kind of learn the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. And what I loved about the story was the subversive tone and the opportunity to talk about, how you can't build walls to keep ideas out of your life, and that, change is just part of evolution. And if you can choose love, you can do it with grace.
Excellent. Very good. And Gitanjali, tell us about your Bombay Rose experience.
Bombay Rose is a very personal film. It's a love letter to a city that I'm born and live in. It tells the story of 3 people who fall in love, and the common these are migrants. These are migrants who come from various parts of India to make their future in a city like Bombay. They're influenced a lot by Bollywood, but they are not success stories. So I'm telling a story about people who live on the streets, how they love, how they lose love, how they survive, and the survival stories make them heroes. So it's it's an ode. It's like a love letter to the city and its life.
Beautiful, beautiful, great. Mr. Keane, tell us about your Over the Moon experience.
Well, it's a story about a little girl in China who is really a combination of both parents, dad being more of the scientific, practical, and her mom is about faith and seeing what others don't see, and tells her the story about a moon goddess that lives on the dark side of the moon and represents love that lasts forever, named Chang'e. And the crisis in Fei is her name. Her life is when her mom passes away, and later on her dad is going to remarry, and she can't imagine what happened to this love that's supposed to last forever. And she decides that if she could just prove to her dad that Chang'e is real, maybe he won't give up on this love for her mom. So she decides to build a rocket to the moon. And it's very much kind of a Wizard of Oz sort of travel to this fantasy land of Lunaria, and she discovers Chang'e is not exactly everything that she thought she was, and they both are dealing with this struggle of losing somebody they love. And at one point, Fei says, I wish things could just go back the way it was. But we don't go backwards, we go forward. And it's going forward that we discover healing and that there's something really wonderful on the other side. That's what Fei finds when she comes back home.
Speaking of wonderful things, maybe now you can all tell us, about a sequence in a movie or a character in your movie that really you thought that it turned out really well, even better than you expected. Maybe go back and look back and see what was you're really proud of about your movie. Tomm?
Well, I guess, there's a lot that I'm proud of, but during the production of the storyboards of the animatic, I used to go for a run at lunchtime every day, and I had a kind of random playlist playing in my headphones. And one day, this song by Aurora Aknes, a Norwegian singer, Running with the Wolves, came on, and I just listened to that song over and over again for my 5-kilometer jog, and came back to the studio and asked the editor to cut it into the work in progress reel we had for this moment where our two main characters have just discovered that they can transform into wolves, and their friendship is blossoming, and they have this night like that's going to change everything. That the whole rest of the story is going to be about trying to hold on to this feeling that she finds, that our main character Robin finds that night. And so everyone in the studio kind of raised their eyebrow, because it was a kind of a pop song with a lot of electronic beats and didn't really sound like something you'd put in a kind of, medieval fantasy set in Ireland. But the lyrics were perfect. And we asked Aurora to re-record it, but with the Irish folk band Keela doing the instrumentation, and our composer Bruno Calais helping with the orchestration. And that sequence then became kind of the tentpole for me of the movie. It had all the different techniques that we developed. Like, we have this wolf vision where we see the world through Robin's eyes, and we see how she can hear so much better. And it's got loads of, like, I love the Tale of Princess Kaguya by Takahata, and I kind of wanted to get some of the feeling that was in that sequence when the princess leaves the palace and takes off all the finery and is running under the moon. And so that was kind of my reference point, and I feel like the team came together and really made something better than I even had in my head that day running around listening to the tune. And I find it endlessly rewatchable. Maybe one of the high points of my career was that James Baxter, the amazing amazing animator. He's not a quadruped. He's bipedal, but he animates quadrupedal creatures very well. Asked, could he do a sequence in the movie, or scene in the movie, a shot or two of the movie? And of course, I asked him to work on that sequence, and I gave him a totally crazy. Ross and myself, my co-director, said, "Whoa, we've got James Baxter. What will we give him?" So he animates a scene where the background is animating and moving. Our two main characters are interacting, and there's a whole pack of wolves running behind them under the moonlight. And, like, of course, he knocked it out of the park. And it's just crazy for me to think that in that sequence there's a scene animated by James Baxter, and Ross and I think both feel that was the tentpole of our movie. And it kind of encapsulated the joy that we wanted to encapsulate in the girls' friendship and in their new powers as wolves.
Awesome. And that Ross is Ross Stewart,
my co-director. Yeah.
Perfect. Walt, tell us about your favorite part of Trolls World Tour.
Oh, again, like Tomm said, like, there's so much to enjoy, all the work that everyone has done in here. But I think what I was really excited about in the end is this balance of entertainment and kind of cultural thematic resonance that we were able to get. First and foremost, it's a comedy, and it's scientifically designed to make you feel good. I was hearing stories of families dancing in their living rooms watching the movie. So it's made to make you laugh. It's got quirky humor and psychedelic imagery, but at the same time, it really addresses issues like cultural appropriation and the importance of diversity and differences. And so to be able to, with the team, craft a film that strikes both that balance, I think was very rewarding.
Very good. Joel, tell us about your caveman family.
There's one of the things that I'm proudest about of the film is kind of a feeling you get watching it, that it's this comedy that comes from positivity. And specifically, there are two characters. I mean, that we have a great cast. The Croods meeting another family. We have so many great actors, but there's two that come to mind, and it's Eep, played by Emma Stone, comes across this other girl. Kelly Marie Tran plays Dawn, and they're completely different girls. And when I approached the project, Croods has been going, like, they've been working on a sequel for many years. So I didn't come in a totally fresh project. I started 3 years ago. And when I approached it, there was a script that already existed and a pivotal moment when the two girls met. And in that script, the two girls were jealous of each other. And the producer, Mark Swift, and I looked at the moment, and for us, we said, it feels negative. it feels like a trope that's been done so many times. And for myself, I have 2 daughters. One of them is 10. And I wanted to portray this female relationship, not just in this negative way or this way where they just talk about boys. And we said, well, what's the honest thing to our movie, to our world? And we have this family in the Croods who come across no other people in the world. And we said, well, if this girl comes across another girl, there's not going to be jealousy. There's not going to be this high school kind of baggage. It's just pure joy at seeing someone else their own age. And the comedy of 2 girls kind of being idiots together. When I like treating them just the same as we would with 2 boys getting together and that friendship. And by the way, Tomm, that's what I loved in Wolfwalkers as well. And I feel like that's it. There's a fresh kind of comedy that comes just because there's been this kind of trope for so long about girls have to check these boxes when they're on the screen. And for me, it was like making that choice that when Eep sees this other girl, she's like, I have a girlfriend. She picks her up. And from there, so many comedic moments and warm moments really came into the movie.
Very good. Definitely. Dan, what about you?
I think because the movie started off as my personal story, one of the coolest things in the process of making the film was watching it become the crew's personal story. Like everyone on the crew had either someone that they missed that they wish they could spend a day with, or they had someone who was like a parent to them, a sibling or a teacher or a friend, or they were that person to someone else. So watching the movie go from being in any way autobiographical to suddenly being its own thing and taking pieces from everyone's lives to create Ian and Barley, our main characters' lives and their situation. And then the best part of that for me in the movie was watching it all come together in the end where you know, Ian makes his sacrifice for his brother and we see the 2 of them come together. That scene is very emotional because we had that idea from the very beginning. We had that first, the idea that this was what was going to happen at the end of the movie, and all the 5 or whatever years it takes to make one of these movies was trying to earn that moment. And then the final great thing for me was then seeing the movie go out and go from being my story to the crew's story to then like people in the world story, and having people on social media write and say, you know, my brother was like a father to me, or my sister was like a parent to me, and my friend, and just sharing their personal stories and how it connected to them. I mean, I think we probably all are experiencing that kind of thing. I mean, that's the fun of making these movies is, you know, I think, Glen, you were kind of saying it yesterday, is the way that they connect with people out in the world in such a huge way that you'd never expect. And it's really, it makes it worth the 6 years of hell trying to make the thing make sense.
Definitely. It was a great job. Kemp, tell us about your favorite moments in Soul.
Well, I mean, look, one of the biggest challenges I think with the film overall was that we challenged ourselves to try to explain a lot of things that are unexplainable and intangible. But I think one of the bravest steps that we took, and that's thanks to Pete and the entire crew, was that we were willing to kind of allow for things to not be completely explained. And one of my favorite moments in the film, I mean, there's so many scenes that I love so much and are so personal to me, but there's one really kind of small moment, and it's when Joe and 22 go down into a subway station and they pass a busker who is singing a song, and it's actually the first time the 22 character really connects to music. And it came from a really personal place for me, because initially as we constructed the scene, they go down in the subway and Joe runs into some jazz players who knew him from playing busking with him. And I remember telling Pete this story about, like, we're going to get to this revelation later on in the film about moments of grace and finding moments of grace in the most unexpected ways. And I was like, it would be really cool if we could let the audience experience one of those moments of grace without them knowing it's going to happen. And from my own experience being a strap hanger growing up in New York, I told them a story about one day, it was like the worst week of my life. Like I had no job. I was completely broke. I had about $5 left in my pocket, and I was on the subway. And I was like moving between cars because one car was empty because someone had defecated in it. So I was finally in a car that was like overpacked with people, and a homeless man came onto the car, and you roll your eyes and go, oh my goodness. And he sang, I remember it was Leo Sayers' When I Need You. And it was the most beautiful version of Leo Sayers' When I Need You I'd ever heard. And even though I was broke, I gave him my last $5 because it lifted me up in a way that I so needed at that moment. And I was like, can we try to get that in that busker moment? And so there's this artist I love called Cody Chestnut. And I just love his voice, and he has this incredible thing he does with his voice. And I found a cue that we gave to our editors, and it was so effective that we ended up bringing Cody Chestnut to Pixar and spent the day recording him to have him be the busker in the subway station to hopefully, if it works, let the audience experience one of those intangible moments of grace before the revelation later on in the film. It's just a little thing, but it means a lot to me, because God, I was so broke, but I just needed the lift of hearing that guy's beautiful voice.
Great story. Thank you. Kris, what about your orphans? I mean, they're not orphans.
Yeah, they actually, they had parents the whole time. I think it is that sort of like backing into how do you end a story with that big what if that is built on this dysfunction? And very early on, we came up with this idea of what if we actually ended it 3 different ways? Like, what if we kind of own the fact that this is a tricky card to back into the slot, So, we wanted to try to, do what I'd call the animation movie ending where, our kids have learned their arc and, we have the John Hughes, moment where it's like our characters lay it all on the table and, they're making the pitch for love with the wrong characters. And I wanted to sort of then flip that into the independent Canadian film, which is what this movie was, where everybody dies in the snowbank. And then I wanted to end the film kind of back where it started in a sitcom. And so the idea of moving through those emotional things was a real kind of high wire act. And when we first attempted the moment, I'm going to spoil it, where the parents reject our kid's pitch, I wanted that to sort of I didn't want anybody to smell it. I wanted to really try to make sure that moment was a complete surprise. And I remember we were doing an early screening and, we had Mark Mothersbaugh's music in there and, Forte was putting all of his acting out on the table and the music was swelling. And then when I wanted half that audience to be mad, you're not going to end the movie this way. I don't want them to be back with those parents. And then when that moment popped, it was one of the biggest reactions I'd ever felt as somebody working in film from an audience, just that explosion. And then how that steered into the emotions of the next scene. It was really cool to sort of watch that with an audience and sort of see, that sort of commitment to the subversiveness of the tone of the film and that kind of belief in the resilience of kids that they can kind of put up with a lot of stuff. And I think my favorite, this is going to sound really small compared to a lot of the other kind of big, there was a Brazilian animator that I had who was working on the scene where they were running through snow. And as a Canadian growing up in fields running through snow, I was just this poor guy, Bruno, was tortured for rounds and rounds and rounds because I just wanted it to feel right. And then every time I see them running through that snow, it just makes me so happy because it feels he got it. So he knows a little bit of the suffering, which is good.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Gitanjali, tell us about your favorite moment in Bombay Rose.
It's not very different from what Tomm and Kemp said, and I love the fact that there is a similarity. It is driven by the music, and it's a part of the film which is emotional, the peak of the emotion for me. because Bombay Rose is not a funny film at all. It's a very real, tragic a film which. So the scene which I when I was working on the animatics and the storyboard, I always love to put in the music which is closest to the mood of the film. And when I was making the animatics, the film had not even been financed. So I was doing it all by myself and just hoping the film gets made. So I was putting whatever music I loved. And there was this scene where my protagonist's lover is dying in her arms. And it was the emotional high point for me. And the music that caught the mood was a Spanish song called Kukuru Kuku Paloma by Caetano Veloso. And this was because I had seen it in Pedro Almodovar's Talk to Her. And I had seen it in Happy Together by Wong Kar-wai. And these are my favorite filmmakers. And I had grown up on this. So I happily put that music on the animatics. And it stayed there till we found a financer and the film started. And by the time the film started, everybody fell in love with the song. Now, this is an Indian film with Hindi music throughout. And suddenly there is a Spanish song. And believe me, nobody asked me, why is this Spanish song here? It just worked so beautifully. And thankfully, my producers, which is unusual for an Indian film, we bought the rights of the song and we used it in the film. And even when the audience watched it, the feeling was very emotional. Nobody really asked, why is this song here? It's like Kemp said, it was to recreate that feeling which you have grown up with and somewhere it transmitted in that scene. Of course, it was the most carefully animated scene. I trained my animator for 1.5 years before he was given the opportunity to do the scene, finally at the end. But the way it turned out, when the film showed in Venice, my festival director had tears in his eyes and just about everybody was emotional. So it ended up becoming the favorite, my favorite scene of the film.
The music, Mr. Glen Keane, tell us about your favorite moment.
Well, there's so many, but I go back to my mentor, Ollie Johnston, saying, Glenn, don't animate what the character's doing. Animate what the character's thinking and feeling. And there's moments where you see Fei-Fei's dad's hand touch Mrs. Zhang's hand, and she realizes something is happening here, and it's not with my mom, and her world turns upside down, and it's all inside Fei-Fei's head. You watch her world turn upside down. It's a beautiful moment. And I was finding that applying that principle was really making a big difference in this movie. But of course, when it came time to a sequence that I storyboarded, which was the very end section with Fei-Fei there with this crane, which represents her mom. And it's this beautiful summing up of the movie moment. We had dialogue in there where she's talking and it's like the lessons you want everybody else to practice. You don't put it in yourself because you kind of don't feel confident enough. You got to have that dialogue. So we had a screening, and after the screening, I'm asking people what they thought. And there was one new guy there, and I particularly asked him, I said, what did you think of the movie? And he was like, what are you asking me? He said, do you really need all that dialogue at the end? And as soon as he said that, I was like, no, don't. Just take it all out. And it's one of the most wonderful moments because you've gone through this whole emotional journey, and to give the audience a moment of reflection, to allow them to get into her head and think and feel what she's feeling. And it was so beautiful. I was talking to Stephen Price, our composer, about this moment and how I really wanted the music as this crane is flying off, that we are gathering all of the emotion of this movie and putting it in the score as this bird is flying away. Really a symbol of her mom flying off to be with, in her life, joining the flock that's flying past the moon. But Stephen, this last Christmas, it was around Christmas Day, and he sent me this little recording that he had made, and he said probably it's just the wine that I was drinking that night, but he just played his guitar and whistled this beautiful little melody, and that is the seed of this glorious moment that every time I hear it, I cannot hold back the tears. And I love that idea how each person's been talking about some real seed, some personal moment grows into something real and big and touches everybody else. That moment for me is really special.
It's been a remarkable year in terms of bringing a lot of important issues into the spotlight, especially the importance of having diverse characters on the screen as well as behind the cameras. Usually when we have these panels, it's very hard to find non-white male directors, and now we finally beginning to see more people of color and women in the spotlight in helming positions, and of course a lot of the movies that we talked about today are also produced by women and people of color. So things are looking a little better, and I just wanted to see what you think about the whole thing and the importance of representation, and animation seems to be moving forward in the right direction. What is your take on it, on this? Tomm, we'll start with you.
Oh, I'm encouraged. Like 60% of our staff is female now in Cartoon Saloon, which is great. And I see from that staff a lot of exciting new filmmaking voices coming up. Our next feature is directed by Nora Toomey, my business partner, and the one after that is by Louise Bagnall, who was nominated for her short for the Oscars a couple of years ago. So I'm excited to see that, at least in terms of gender, The sequence I spoke to, actually, the Running with the Wolves, was storyboarded by a fantastic storyboarder, a person of color. So I see positive shoots that I think are going to continue to grow, and I think we're going to see much more diversity over the next few years. I see it coming, and I just think we need to nurture it and water that plant.
Walt?
Yeah, like Tomm says, I'm really encouraged that I'm starting to see the landscape change a lot. We have a lot of programs here at DreamWorks where we reach out to young people because we think that's definitely a solution. Trying to look out right now and look for diverse artists is hard to find. I think you need to reach out to the younger people, go into the schools and high schools and say, hey, this is a fun job. Most of the time, guys, most of the time, it's a fun job, and it's a job for you to have. So, we're all doing our part. I'm just myself. I'm mentoring a young woman right now to be a director. So, just doing what we can. And like Tomm, I said, I think we feel encouraged that the landscape is changing quite a bit.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's so much of, I think in animation, at least here at DreamWorks, a lot of directors come up through storyboarding. And that's one way that I think I heavily rely on my story team for not just drawing out the scene, but bringing themselves into it. And I'd say I'd extend that to the animators, but I feel like one of the encouraging things, even in 2020, this year, is it's really expanded the reach that I feel like we're comfortable working with somebody remotely now, where I'm actually really excited for the future of animation and getting more diverse stories, just because like now we can access somebody across the world and you feel comfortable, and we've now gotten used to working in this way. Not that I don't miss being together, but I think the exciting thing is there's so much more animation being done now, which is a call for more stories and more points of view to come in, so we don't just kind of reiterate the same thing. So for me, I'm excited for the future of animation and bringing in more diversity.
I couldn't hear you, but I think you said.
What about you?
Okay. Yeah, there's still a very long way to go. The work is never done, but I'm also encouraged by just seeing the new talent at Pixar, and it was, I think, just announced yesterday, Domi Shi's feature film Turning Red is coming out, and it's amazing. And just seeing it, seeing new voices at the company over the last few years, and how the films are changing and growing, frankly, really makes you realize what you've been missing and what we've been missing out as a result. And it's just so exciting to see the change. And it's everybody's job to continue that support and encouragement to get women and people of color in leadership roles all across the company, and represented in the films, so that kids are growing up and seeing themselves in the films, so that they can then imagine, hey, maybe I could be in that role. And it's an exciting time, but still a long way to go, but an exciting time, and I'm hopeful.
When you were growing up, did you feel that there was a place in animation for you?
Me? No. But honestly, it wasn't from me feeling like it was exclusive. It was a job that I didn't know existed. And that's the key thing, is that at the time that you ask a kid in a public school in Brooklyn, what do you want to be when you grow up? There's 10 options. There's doctor, lawyer, fireman, policeman. Like these are jobs that don't exist to a lot of kids. So, I agree that, a lot of animation directors come out of story, which makes a lot of sense. But one of the things that I have found encouraging about Pixar is that not people can come from, one of Pixar, I would argue's better directors is Lee Unkrich. He was an editor. You got to be willing to let people come from different areas. The only reason I even had the audacity to believe that I could do the job is because I'm a playwright, and one of my favorite playwrights, John Logan, wrote this animated film called Rango. So I figured, well, why not? Because normally something would kick in and say, well, I've never done this before, so I probably shouldn't be doing that because there's someone more qualified than me to do this job. But I'm like, but there's another playwright who did exactly that, and I thought the end results were pretty damn good. So I stand to believe that there's and understand the pipeline is filling in a lot better. There's a lot more talent, but ultimately it's up to the people in power to make a decision to invite us in as partners. Like Dan said, if you don't make us partners and we don't have any decision-making ability, it stays charity, and charity isn't going to move this forward. I'll admit, I don't like, when I found out that I was a first, it actually kind of depressed me a little bit, because it's a burden when you're the first and you're scrutinized and criticized in a way that can feel really unfair. Like, it's not my fault that everything that happened before me happened the way that it did. I'm just here to try to do the best job and help Pete make the best possible movie now. And so being a first can stink, but it also, you realize that just from being there, you've inspired a whole lot of people who didn't even think they could do this job to think, oh, wow, now I really want to be at a Pixar. I really want to be at a Disney anime. I really want to make animated films. So no, I didn't know it was something that was open to me, even though I wrote comics when I was a kid. But I think seeing people in positions of power and leadership positions, that works wonders. And I think I'm very positive about the future, not just at Pixar, but everywhere. I see, Dan was actually, one of our EPs on Soul. And another EP was Kiri Hart, who, is a woman of color. So it's not just the directors, it's not just the writers, it's having these voices at the EP level, at the producer level, all throughout. That's what's going to really bring about the change.
Excellent. Well put. Kris, what's going up north?
Well, I mean, it's hard to add to all the the very smart things that have already been said. Where I'm encouraged is I think about 10 years ago I started to see a sea change in the schools, and in terms of at least the schools up here in Canada, like the diversity of international students coming in, and the gender flip. I mean, I think it's probably more like 60 to 70% female coming out of schools. And how animation works in these, kind of 4 or 5 year timelines, it is showing itself. But, Kemp is right. It takes the will of the gatekeepers to also, shift their, access point. And it is an act of, a will to sort of look for the diversity in the stories and the diversity in the storytellers. And here's where I'm really optimistic is what I'm seeing, from my experience with Netflix, is that they are looking at filmmakers and films from all over the world. And they are really kind of gravitating towards that authorship model where it's people with interesting ideas are now having an opportunity to not only make their ideas but have an audience receive those ideas, because it's a different consumption pattern, and to me that's a really good bellwether for positivity going forward. And I'm currently working at Sony, and I see that company making really, really, really good decisions in terms of who they're letting tell their stories, and I it's hard to find the right word. It's not even letting, but the stories that they're choosing to promote and choosing to develop with the filmmakers. It feels organic, and it feels like it is heading in the just a really good positive direction. So I'm optimistic, but I do think we have to do the work, I think, as an industry. So,
Gitanjali, tell us about your journey. I mean, you've done so much with this new movie, and when you were a young girl, did you want to work in animation, and did you see it as a possibility?
No, where I come from, a country which does not support and Bollywood, which is one of the biggest and the richest industry, animation was never a profession. I was considered crazy to be choosing it. I did not study animation. I actually studied art. Back then, there was no school teaching animation. There was nothing in animation. This was in the 90s in India. So we were just learning it by ourselves. And there was one little studio where I started working. And I said, I want to make films. And I was from an art school, and the two kind of came together. So it was very naive. It was very, it was very different. It's difficult to explain. But where I find myself now is I'm very impressed by Tomm saying 60% of the staff is women, because honestly, I thought I was making an impressive number. 40% of the people who have worked on Bombay roles are women. And in India, the problem is actually caste system, not racism, and gender, of course. And in terms of gender, also making an animation film the kind I was making, which is not for children, which is not funny, does not have star voices, even a man in my place would have found it very difficult to make the film. So you become a warrior right from the beginning, and you fight your wars. But I was happy that without actually attempting to, I had 40% of the people on the film who were women, and these were women in very leading positions: the executive producer, the producer, myself, the production designer, the voice, the music, and a bunch of new artists who were coming in from colleges who were learning on the film. It was just a coincidence that there were as many women as men that I could choose from, and it struck me as 40% only after making the film. But I feel there are two ways of doing animation in India. One is the independent studios where I make my film, and one is the big corporate studios, because India is a big outsource industry for animation all over the US. Now, those are the money-making big studios. That's where the disparity is still very huge. That's where there is a difference in the payment salaries between of the same post that a man or a woman holds. But independent studios like ours can afford to make these changes. So we are living in a dual thing. I feel the change is coming, but the change, unless it is in the place where the power is, where the money is being made, it is not going to trickle down to us women too easily. That is where we still need to make much more of an effort. But it's heartening to see, at least in the independent studios, the representation of women and colored people, or in case of India, people from different castes, is highly represented, is growing.
Very well put. Glen, you've seen the industry change throughout the years. Tell us about your take on the whole thing with the diversity issue.
Well, when I started at Disney, there was only 50 people in the entire Disney animation building. And it had come down to, I think there were 6 animators, and none of them were women. They were all white guys. There was very little being taught about what Disney animation was. Matter of fact, it was about to just it was a flame that was about to go and gone. And that group of 9 old men, which was 6 at that point, decided that they should start training other people. And I think that has an impact in what's going on here, that as that started to train a new generation, films started to go out and touch other cultures, but still was sort of centered in Hollywood. And it's really pretty wonderful to see what's happening. At a certain point, I was feeling frustrated at Disney, feeling like I needed something and I couldn't tell what it was. And Ed Catmull said, "Well, Glen, what are you looking for? What do you want?" Because he could see the restlessness in me. And I said, "I don't know, Ed. I want to creatively live without walls. I just want to." I know people at all these different studios, but every studio has like big walls, and I can't walk into DreamWorks without creating some crisis at Disney, and I want to talk to somebody else over here, and I had spent time at the Paris studio and realizing every day as I walked from the Paris studio home, you went through a section that was like a little Africa. I mean, it was a whole different community, and everybody was speaking a language I didn't understand, and I realized how diverse this world was. And wouldn't it be wonderful if each culture could be telling their stories back? And this has kind of become a goal of mine, is how can we help other cultures tell their stories back? Over the Moon was an opportunity to share those things that I had learned, and it became very much part of what we did, was a lot of lectures and passing that on. When I was working with Kobe, Kobe said, because he was visiting the animation studios and we were going and speaking to different studios, and he said, "Glen, I gotta tell you, I feel like a grain of pepper in a salt shaker here. And we've got to start going to communities where these young people don't understand that animation is possible for them. It's exactly what you were saying, Kemp, and have an impact on them and make it seem possible, because it is. And fortunately for me, on Over the Moon, I had Jenny Rim as my producer, and I think it's sometimes you need somebody else coming in to help you make that change. Jenny is Asian, and it was like number one on her priority is bring in as many Asian voices, many Chinese voices, bring in as many female voices as possible to make this film, and we did, and it really had an impact in the authenticity of the film. I am really confident that this big bang that's happening, going out and spreading around the world of animation, is going to continue to open the possibilities. I was talking a couple weeks ago to an artist in Ghana, and I was looking at his artwork, and I said, "Where did you go to school? Because this looks like you were trained by the same guys that trained me." And he said, "Well, there's no schools here in Ghana, but I've just learned from watching movies and the internet." And it was just so amazing to see. Here's this guy that is living in this place in Ghana where they would take slaves and send them to Africa. And here's this guy who's a descendant of those people. And he's drawing beautifully animated characters. And it's absolutely wonderful, the potential of where animation is going to go in the future.
That's great. Thank you. I guess we have time for one last question. This is a question that everyone who reads a magazine always emails us, and you've probably heard before, but for their sake, if you could go back and give some advice to a younger version of yourself about your career in animation, what kind of tip would you give yourself? Tomm, we'll start with you. Last round.
Yeah, no, I guess persistence, it's all it is. I mean, I've been honored today to read a New Yorker article that kind of summarized my life in like 3 pages, which is surreal and lovely. But I think a lot of the moments I was very anxious and was unsure if I should keep going with my own path or whether I should cash in my chips and, just try and get a real job and kind of, wise up and realize that this kind of dream was, I'd gone as far as I could go. And at every stage, I was lucky that a mentor or a friend would pop up and encourage me to keep going what I was doing. And if I could go back in time and say that to younger me who was anxious or fretting or wondering if he was on the right path, I would say, no, just keep going. It's worth it to keep plugging along the way you're going,
Excellent. Walt, what would you say to Walt Jr.? Little Walt.
Yeah, I think I would say, and this I tell a lot of young people this because I wish I had known it, is, while you're studying animation, you end up immersing yourself in the history of cinema and studying a lot of movies and a lot of art, which I did. But once I got to be a director, how much more you really apply to the notes and the making of the film. So, go out there and have human experiences, fall in love and get your heart broken and study psychology and study the history of the world, because those are the things that come up in the meetings when you're talking about the notes and making the movies. So most of all, just get away from the screen and go live your life, and also pop open all kinds of books.
Yeah. Go.
It's funny. I was right there with you, Walt, and maybe it's because Walt was a mentor to me. Going back to, I think we worked on Shrek together, and I've taken so much advice from Walt. But I do feel like Walt's saying, of the expanding your idea, your definition of music, of a sport, of a culture, the wider that kind of prism gets, the more empathy I think we feel. And what's amazing about animation is it's an ultimate kind of casing of empathy, that we're able to take this thing that's characters that are usually inanimate or animals, and put everybody, regardless of gender or race, into the point of view of that protagonist. And I think that's such a wonderful casing, like I said. But the only way we can put the audience in is if we can see that ourselves. And I think broadening our empathy for others and for the world is a very important thing in growing.
Dan.
Yeah, I really just agree with everything that's been said so far. That's really important. Have a life. And even, one thing I would have told myself is what we were just talking about before, is to be more aware of diversity in the storytelling that I was just trying to do at a young age, and thinking a little bit more about the folks around me that weren't getting the privileges that I was getting, and to be supportive in any way I can. I wish that was something that that I had been aware of more at a younger age, just in general. But yeah, I agree. Trusting your gut, having life experiences, all that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Kemp.
Kemp, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I probably would have told my younger self just that my voice has value. At a time when I was being very, very dismissed for just about everything, that that my voice mattered. And similar to what Tomm says, I would have just probably encouraged perseverance. It wouldn't have changed the challenges that I would have faced over those decades, but I probably would have saved a lot of money in Xanax.
Good advice. Kris.
What to add? I mean, if I go back to talk to my young self, I was kind of like Tomm. I was anxious and afraid, and the world was always ending. It's like, we couldn't draw on paper what was going to happen. Or the lesson is, I wouldn't take away the fear. Actually, I don't think that's a fair thing to do to any human being. I think it's sort of, to echo what everybody's saying. I think it's like, find your life and find your voice in that, and it's okay. And I honestly believe that for me, it's like, as long as I got a sketchbook and a pencil to draw with, life's going to be okay. And I think that was something I wasn't aware of the value when I was, first starting out at the age of 18, and over the years, I think that base skill and that kind of, the courage to just sort of sit quietly in the corner and draw what you see, always that's where the solutions are in life for me.
Gitanjali.
Before I answer this, I just want to say something to Glen Keane, because it means a lot. When we were growing, when we were learning animation, there was a friend of mine, much younger than me, called Chetan Sharma, and we were learning it by ourselves on the job. And he would sit with video cassettes of Glen Keane's animation films and go frame by frame. And he learned animation from you, Mr. Glen Keane, very much like the young man in Ghana that you were talking about. So there are many of us who have learned animation from watching your drawings. And if he found me talking to you, he would be very, very jealous. So this is just a little anecdote. But yeah, so this also to say where I come from. And when my first short film in 2006 made it to Cannes and won 3 awards, I was so overwhelmed. Everybody was asking me, so are you on to your next feature film? Because that is the way to go. I did not have the confidence. I was not prepared. I was not ready. It was a bit too much. And at that point, I said, no, I just want to keep making short films. By the time I was ready to make feature films, that steam had gone. And that is one thing I feel, if I had been more confident, if I had been a little more ambitious, and of course, circumstances made me less confident, but if I had been that is one thing I would have told my younger self to just, I would have made my first feature film a few years earlier. And that means a lot. of course, the situation has changed now for younger animators, younger women animators. They can go in for it. Back when I did, it wasn't. But I still feel I should have been a little more like a man and done it. Now I am, and now is where I have reached. But I could have saved a few years.
Ben.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And someday, I hope I get a chance to meet your friend just to talk about that. That would be so cool. So let's plan that. Since the question is about what you would tell your young self, there was a point where if the rocket took off for me, it happened at this moment. My dad, who is a cartoonist, and I shadowed him everywhere, always to the art store, everywhere we went. And he said, Glen, and I was 8 years old, Glen, I'm a cartoonist. You're an artist. And it was the most wonderful moment because it was like being knighted. And that launched me. What he didn't tell me, which I would ask that he could have told me, was that, as an artist, you think that because you are growing in age and you desire to grow as an artist, your path is going to be like that. That's the way growth happens. And I figured that, but it's not like that. Instead, it goes like this. It's a step thing. And I didn't realize that until the first time I got to the wall here. I was growing, I was moving forward. I wasn't really getting better. I was moving forward. And I hit this wall where I remember at Disney feeling I was 20 years old and felt like, what a mistake. I'm terrible. Everything I'm doing is, I don't like it. I just was at the end of my rope and I felt like, I just need to get out of this. And though you will not get up from the chair, you sit there and you keep working at it, and finally you give up. And I remember just getting up and walking down the hallway and went up the stairwell to the second floor where Walt Disney had a little library. And he'd been collecting art books because in order to move his staff from being able to do like silly symphonies and very simple animation they were doing in order to do Bambi and, this whole other level, he would personally drive his artists to Art Center and drop them off so that they would get the training. And then he started collecting all these art books. So I just went in there and looking through art books. And I pulled out Degas. And there was something about Degas that just struck me. I loved the beautiful grace of his ballerina and the pastel colors. And suddenly I wasn't even thinking about animation anymore. I was just in love with the art and the artist. And so I took that back with me and I started to draw my wife that way. And pretty soon I was no longer stuck. My animation just suddenly started getting better because I hit that wall and now I was up here because of something new. And it's always the new thing, be open, step out of that focus of trying to solve the problem, the artistic problem, and be open for something new. Open the windows, read a poem, listen to music, find an artist, but realize that you don't have to know what that is. It's going to be a gift. I really truly believe that the very best things in life are a gift when we are open to discover them. If I could have told myself that then, that would have saved some pain.
Wow. Well, thank you all for the gift of your time and your amazing advice today. I can't tell you what a pleasure it was to talk to all of you on this Zoom meeting, and thanks for entertaining us, inspiring us in 2020, and keep up the amazing work. Cheers to all of you. Tomm, Walt, Joel, Dan, Kemp, Kris, Gitanjali, Glen, thank you so much for joining us today. All the best to you. Stay safe.
Thank you, Rami.
Thank you, Rami.
Thanks.